Hello, welcome to this video. Today we're going to be going over a new variant called connected, and we can just kind of real quick see here that the rules for connected are that all mines must be orthogonally and diagonally connected, as the name kind of suggests. And what this really intuitively means is just each mine must be like part of like a total, I guess, group, where we can see here that they are all like connected to each other even though it's just diagonally, whereas in both of these cases there are groups that are completely isolated from the rest of the mines. We're just going to go ahead real quick and go through a simpler puzzle for this, so you can kind of see what some of the logic might look like for this variant. So a good place to start is just going to be to consider this 3 clues specifically. And oftentimes, honestly, looking at clues on the edge of the grid is a pretty good way to get a start with these puzzles. So first, let's consider what happens if this one right here is not a mine. Then we get these 3 must be mines, just in order to satisfy the 3. We run into a problem where this mine is isolated from the rest of the mines. There isn't a way for it to head out because the square is blocked, so we know this must be a mine. And it looks like similarly, we might be able to determine that there are some restrictions on the mines in this general area right here, right? Like, let's consider, for instance, if this one right here were a mine. Then we know, first of all, that it needs to leave through somewhere. It can't go up because that would require at least 2 more mines, so this one cannot be a mine. If we're headed this direction, then we've actually also blocked it off, so we know it cannot like go directly there either. What this really just leaves is kind of like a single passageway for it to head through, so we know it had to be something like this, right? So we can just go ahead and mark off all of those. I don't actually think that's... I think it'd be more fruitful to actually look at this mine. Sorry about that. But okay, so let's just notice that this one has only 4 possible squares it could leave through, right? So we can mark all of these ones as being non-mines. But then with this 2 and 4, we can use the kind of trick where, since we know there's 2 more mines around the 4 than the 2, and this is the only disjoint region, there must be 2 mines here. So we can mark both of these. But then that finishes up the 2 clue, and you can see here that we have 2 isolated groups. Then we can determine this is not a mine. And there we go, it's a 0, which gives us a lot of information. This 2 is just finished. We still have the choke point I talked about earlier, so we can go and mark those. And additionally, we can kind of notice through a similar idea with this 3 that if there were a mine here, it wouldn't actually be able to leave because of the 1, so the mine must be there. Then using the same idea where there's 1 mine here, we can determine then that there's exactly 1 mine here. So for this 2 to not be overloaded, this cannot be a mine. Of course this 4 is finished, but you can also alternatively, if we imagine like I hadn't done that yet, in order for this mine to leave, it would have to go through this square. So we could have gotten that, at least this one filled in, using that kind of argument as well. Anyway, from here we can kind of just keep clicking through some of the mines. Something else we can kind of think about, and this is generally the case with like when there's just 1 mine left in this kind of structure. If that mine were like here, for instance, then we would actually not be able to connect it with the rest of the mines, so we know that it cannot be here specifically, since it isn't directly touching one. Okay, but now then. If we have a mine up here, for instance, I think that also causes issues. Yeah, because then there's no way to put a mine down here without it being a new group. So we can also mark that one off. In addition, okay. I think now we kind of need to more so go into the total number of mines left. We know there's 2 mines around this, 1 mine around this, right? Just based off of the amount of mines that each of these need. There are 3 mines total, so there must not be a mine here. And from here we can kind of finish up the puzzle. There we go. Alright. Definitely not the cleanest solve, but it should be okay. We're now going to move on to a more difficult level. So let's just go through that. We're going to go ahead and give this a shot. First of all, this clue is just already finished. We can, no, a lot of them actually are. We can kind of just click through it. We know that since this group of mines needs to leave the 5, at least one of them must, or rather, there must be a mine in this group right here, and that actually tells us this one cannot be a mine, so we can go and mark that, and okay. Now then, let's think real quick. So let's just say that the mine for like this 2, well, Let's see. Admittedly, I am not nearly as good at this variance as I feel like I am at some of the others, which is perfectly fine, but it means that some of these solves might be a bit slower than my ones in the past. But let us think real quick. So, first of all, we have 7 open spots around the 6, well I guess 6 if we don't worry about this mine, with 1 less exactly mine spots to fill, right? So that means what we can kind of do if we want is we can just consider what happens if we just mark a random square as not having a mine, right? So if, like for instance, we do that, then we know there are mines in all of these positions. This one doesn't look like it really runs into any issues beyond, I guess, just cutting off a large portion of the grid, but I don't think that actually completely matters. Okay, let's instead think about what happens in this case right here. That doesn't also necessarily run into any issues, but my main idea with this is I will just kind of rotate around and see if we really run into any problems. We honestly might not, or if we do, it'll be with a weirder case, or a later case, I guess. No. Okay, something I am considering is, we've noticed a lot of them involve 2 mines here. What if we just put like a mine up here, right? Then we know all of these must be filled in just because there's only 1 mine left in this group here. None of these ones can be mines, and here we run into a problem where in order for this mine to join up with the rest of them, it's going to have to make at least 5 mines be in this group, right? And here, I'll just clean that up a little bit. At minimum, there will be 5 mines around here. So we can say this one is not a mine. And then from here, looks like, here, I'll just get rid of these marks real quick. Looks like we can more or less solve a lot of the puzzle. Where, if this one were a mine, then we get that there are 4 mines, like, I guess, in this kind of group, right? So we know none of those can be mines, but then we've run into an issue where this 6 can only have at most 5 mines around it. That breaks the 6, so we can thus say that the mine is right here for that 1. That finishes up the 6, finishes up the 5, finishes up the 4. I think we already talked about this logic where, yeah, we can just solve it like that. There we go. Okay. So now we are going to move on to a combination puzzle with these, and we'll see how well I do. This is definitely going to be much more difficult, but that is okay. And if you don't recall multiple from last time, I don't know, rewatch the video, and we'll go ahead and solve this one, I believe. Okay. So first of all, we can use parity logic to determine neither of these can be filled in, and then from here, we know since there is a mine in this region right here, there cannot be mines in either of these, because that would overload the 3, so we can mark both of these off. And something that we can kind of actually notice here is that if there's a mine here, for instance, then it has to go up like that to leave, since we know that one is not a mine. Similarly, if there's a mine here, it has to kind of go up through that way. In either case, what we've noticed is that the 3 clue is finished without this cell. So we can go ahead and just click on that. And actually, I might just continue with this kind of line of argument case-wise and see what it gives us. So if we're going by the yellow case, and here I'll just mark off both of these, we know that this 4 already has 3 around it, so the only way to kind of finish that without overloading it is to put 1 there. And then for this 5, we may have actually run into a problem here, where this 5 needs all of these to be filled in, right, in order to finish it. But this 3 now has 4 around it. So I think that means we can actually just go with the red direction there. Yeah, looks like it. Alright. This 4 clue is now just finished by parity. This 7 clue is almost done. We just know now that there's 1 mine left in here. For this 3 clue, if this one were a mine, it would overload it, so we can go and mark that off. And now for this 5 clue, I guess we already probably knew this, is just since this mine needs to head out through one of these 2. Yeah, actually, we already knew that one couldn't be a mine. At this point, we could just use parity, though, to solve it. This 3 is also finished. This 8 is also finished, so is the 6. This puzzle might just be finished at this point. By parity, we know this one cannot be a mine, and since there's 1 mine here, and then with those, if we put a mine in here, we can get a total of 5 mines currently, so in order to get to 7, we need to have 1 there. but then this finishes up the 3 clue. 7 clues now done. The 7 clue is also finished, and so is the 6 clue. Okay, so there we go. That was just a nice connected multiple puzzle real quick. And something else that is interesting about this game, we're going to go into it real quick, is you can kind of see here that it has some interesting combinations. As I mentioned in the past, usually the way combinations work is it takes one variant that messes with like what a clue does. So you can like see, for instance, here, clues mean completely different things. It's a bit of a spoiler, but that's okay. It takes like one of these clue changing variants and combines it with a variant that deals more with the positioning of mines. Right? But they've included some combinations that do not actually do that. And I think we'll maybe start with the easier one, where in this case you can see it's combined both our connected idea and this other idea we talked about earlier, this other rule, where there cannot be a mine in any 2x2 area. Right? These are both just based off of the position of mines globally and are not actually at all involved with specific clues themselves, but you can see that they're combined here. So we'll just go ahead and try and solve one of these real quick. Okay, so by general quad logic, we know that any one on the edge will have a mine exactly there to fill out squares. We can finish up that one. And now then, since we are playing with connected, we know this mine must leave through here in order to connect with the other 13, so we can mark that one. There's a square right here with no mine, and there's only one mine left around this 3, so this cannot be a mine. Alright. Okay. So something we can consider here is that if this one were not a mine, we can kind of try and think about how exactly we could get this mine to connect up with this group. It would need to go through this choke point, right? So we at least need to have a mine up here, but then it would also have to go through this choke point right here. And it's kind of a choke point, it isn't really, but in order to actually do that, it can't go here because that finishes up the 3, so it'd have to like go loop around this way, right? I don't actually know if this is really going to cause any problems. It might not, to be honest, but we know in this case then this 3 is finished, right? So then the mines have to loop around like this. And no, it doesn't actually look like it really causes any problems. That's okay. We can see if there are any similarities with if we instead assume that there is a mine here. So first of all, in this case, we know that there can't be a mine really anywhere that isn't in this 2x2 grid, so we can mark this one off, and importantly we can mark that this one is also not a mine, so it's just never one. Right, so in the red case we have a mine here. We also have a 2x2 box here, so there has to be a mine. And I'm actually realizing that in the yellow case, we actually just know that can't happen. I did not catch this, but there's a 2x2 box here with no mines in it, so we can actually just go ahead and do this legitimately. There's a 2x2 box here, it has no mine, so thus the mine cannot be there. Okay. And one other thing that we can kind of notice is that since there's a mine in this box and there's another box here that needs a mine, like, we know that this one up here cannot have a mine in it or else it would overload the 3. So we can just mark that real quick. Using some logic we talked about earlier, for quads we know, or for connected we know this one must have a mine. Both these can also be filled in because of the 5. This actually finishes up this area. That gets all the mines over there. And now in order for this group to leave, it needs to go through there. But that finishes up the 3. In order to further go like through this 5, it needs to kind of loop around this way, right? Similarly, this one needs to go down here. And actually it looks like now we can use the global mine count to finish this puzzle off. There are only 2 mines left in the entire grid, and this 5 needs 2 mines around it, so anything that isn't in the 5 cannot have a mine. This clue still needs to be finished, and in order for these 2 groups to meet up, the last mine must be placed here. And there we go. Pardon me. That's a connected quad puzzle done. And we're just going to go ahead and do a more difficult one. I think I'll stick with 6x6 for this. Partially just because I'm still trying to finish up that for all of these. But yeah. Before like moving on to 7x7, we'll just go and get into it though. So in order for this... I guess we can probably start by looking at this 3 clue right here. Let's assume that we put a mine in the corner. In order for this mine to leave, it either has to head out kind of like through here or down here. If we first assume that it's heading out to the right, then it needs to go here, and it mustn't go out through one of these 2. right? So we can go ahead and mark all of these ones as non-mines, but you can see here we have a square. Similarly, if it needs to go down, or rather if it's going to head down, it'll go through here, but we once again get a square of non-mines. So we can then conclude that this one cannot be a mine. Now then, since this, there's a 1 here, we know at least one of these must be a mine. I think this actually does give us some level of information involving this. We know that one of these 2 must be a mine, and since there is a 2x2 square here, we know, and this one isn't going to be a mine in this case, we know one of these 2 must be a mine. We can also then conclude that this is not a mine. Similarly, in this situation, we actually run into the exact same kind of pairing of, 2 areas that need mines, and this one not being a mine. So we can just globally say that is not a mine. There we go. Okay. We'll see. Honestly, this one is a lot more difficult than most of the other puzzles I've done so far on this channel, so we'll see how I do. We can just globally mark that each of these 3 groups has a mine in it. I don't think it actually matters a ton right now which mine is where. Something else that we can notice is that this group of 2 cells also needs a mine in order to fill out the square requirements, which is interesting. I don't know if that's going to matter a lot right now, though. We also know that one of these 3 needs a mine, and actually something that we can kind of rule out right now is the case where this is a mine. Since we have a mine here and we have a mine here, this 2 is finished, so I can mark off both of those. But you can see here, in order to make this square abide by quad logic, we need a mine up here. This mine is disconnected though, so we can thus conclude this is not a mine, which actually tells us there is a mine in this grid right here. More specifically, actually, we know there's exactly 1 mine here, right? So if there's a mine up here, for instance, in order for it to leave, there has to be a second mine, but that breaks the entire 2 clue, just kind of going back through our chain of deductions, so we know this mine must be down here. Alright. Here we can just kind of click through some stuff real quick, and there we go. Okay. So now actually I think the fact that there is a mine here might be relevant, although it's hard to tell if there's exactly 1 or if there could be multiple. One thing that I think is important though is, let's say that this one up here is a mine. We actually then run into a problem where we can't connect up this group, so we can also determine that the last mine around this 2 is right here. And this gives us a little more information to work with. We know that there must be a mine in this 2x2, so the last mine for this 3 can't be over here. There we go. And now then, if we're just going to assume that the mine is here, for instance, this actually kind of leads us down a chain of deduction where you can see we've overloaded this 3, so we can safely say that this is the last mine. There we go. By normal quad logic, we know that there is a mine here. We can fill that out real quick. And I think at this point we mostly will just need to, I guess, okay, here's something we can kind of think about. How is this one going to connect up to the rest of them? If we say it's going to connect up by going this way, right, we can go ahead and try that real quick, but I think we're actually going to run into problems with this 3. So, for instance, let's say it's just heading up there. We can see that there isn't actually enough mines left around this clue for it to actually connect up that way. So then we know it's going to head this way to connect up, which gives us some information that it's going to go through this choke point specifically. And then, I guess this also tells us that there is a mine here, but I wonder if we can use this, the idea it's going to connect up this way, in conjunction with this 4 for something. This is kind of what I'm thinking is maybe, for instance, let's assume that both of these mines are right here, right? I don't actually know if this tells us anything on its own, but no, not necessarily. Maybe it's better to start with the assumption that this one's a mine. Okay, sure. So then what we're going to see is there are since there is a mine here, and a mine rather, since this mine needs to connect up, we know it has to go through here, right? So then this would leave us with 2 mines left, which both must be around this 5. So then we know that this one, and this one are not mines. So in the alternative case where, and there's also just one mine over here, the alternative case where this one is a mine, then we know that there must be 2 mines at least around this 4, right? If that one was a mine and that one was a mine, then they would be disconnected, so we know there must be a mine at least here. So first of all, we can just mark this, but I think actually in addition, we know that the last 2 mines must also be around this 5, so we can mark off any mines that aren't, like that one for instance. So I think that this actually gives us some information in general, just that there is not a mine here, and that neither of these ones are mines. But of course, actually, in order just to connect this group up at all, we know that this one must be the last mine. So there we go. Alright. That was definitely a little more tricky than I was expecting, but that is a good thing. When we get some of the variants in here later, it'll definitely get a lot more challenging. Like, specifically, this one it's harsh. I'll tell you that much. Anyway, that I think is going to conclude my video for today. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one. Goodbye.